In 1969, General Motors had a performance problem on both sides of the Pacific. On the American side, Buick, the division whose customers were supposed to be insurance agents and country club members, was quietly building the fastest car in the GM lineup. On the Australian side, Holden, the division whose customers were supposed to be practical Australian families buying large, comfortable, fundamentally unexciting transport, was building the car that would define Australian muscle. Neither car was supposed to exist. Buick wasn't supposed to beat Chevrolet. Holden wasn't supposed to build a muscle car at all. Both divisions had been given their lane by General Motors' corporate structure, and both had quietly stepped out of it. This is the Buick GSX Stage 1 versus the Holden Monaro HT GTS 350, the GM Civil War that happened in America against the GM car that was never supposed to be fast in Australia. Two forgotten performance machines from the same parent company, built on opposite sides of the world in the same era, sharing the same corporate DNA and the same story of being underestimated by everyone except the people who actually drove them. The Buick story has been told in outline before, but its implications for General Motors' global brand management have rarely been made explicit. Buick occupied the space in GM's American hierarchy between Oldsmobile's practicality and Cadillac's luxury. It was the premium brand for buyers who wanted quality and size, but weren't ready for the full Cadillac price premium. Buick's customers were stable, affluent, and emphatically not the demographic that was buying Chevelles and Camaros on Saturday nights. Buick's engineers, however, were not interested in those demographic constraints. The Grand Sport had existed since 1965 as Buick's performance answer, and by 1970, it had evolved into the GSX, the Grand Sport Experimental, a purpose-built performance statement available in Saturn Yellow or Apollo White, with a hood-mounted tachometer and front and rear spoilers that made absolutely clear that this was not a car your insurance agent drove. And for the 1,026 buyers who ordered it with the Stage 1 option, the GSX was hiding an engine that General Motors had gone to considerable lengths to suppress. The Stage 1 option cost $199 and delivered modified cylinder heads, a high-performance camshaft, a recalibrated carburetor, and a sealed cold air induction system routing outside air directly into the 455 cubic inch V8. Buick's engineers knew the engine was producing well over 400 horsepower. The window sticker said 360. The corporate rule was that Chevrolet held the power crown and no other GM division was permitted to challenge it on paper. The number that couldn't be hidden was the torque figure. 510 pound-feet at 2,800 revolutions per minute. That appeared in Buick's own technical specifications because there was no corporate prohibition on claiming more torque than Chevrolet. Horsepower was the metric that mattered for marketing and insurance classification. Torque was the number that mattered at the drag strip, and the Stage 1's torque, arriving earlier in the rev range, at lower RPM than the LS6 Chevelle could access its 500 pound-feet, is why Car and Driver's 1970 head-to-head test ended with the Buick running a 13.38 and the LS6 running a 13.76. Now go to Australia. Holden was established as a fully independent General Motors subsidiary in 1948, producing Australian-designed and Australian-built cars for the local market. Unlike Ford Australia, which maintained stronger links to American Ford engineering, Holden developed its own body designs while drawing on GM's global mechanical components, including, by the late 1960s, the Chevrolet small block V8 family. The Monaro arrived in 1968 as Holden's performance answer to the Ford Falcon GT. The name was a reference to the Monaro high plains of New South Wales. High country, austere landscape, the suggestion of toughness without elaboration. The car was a two-door coupe variant of Holden's HK Kingswood family sedan, which in standard form was exactly what Australian family cars of the era were expected to be. Large, comfortable, front-engine rear drive, and built to cover the vast distances of Australian inland roads without drama. The GTS variant, Gran Turismo Sport, changed the brief. Holden's engineers were not naive about what the Australian market wanted from a performance car. They had watched the Ford Falcon GT win the Bathurst 500 and understood that in Australia, performance credibility came from the mountain circuit at Bathurst, not the quarter mile. The GTS 350 put a 350 cubic inch Chevrolet V8 under the Monaro's hood, the same basic engine family that was powering Chevrolet Camaros and Chevelles on the other side of the Pacific, and calibrated the chassis for the specific demands of Australian roads, which meant long-distance highway use at sustained speed as much as it meant racing circuits. The 350 cubic inch V8 in the Monaro HT GTS 350 produced approximately 250 horsepower in SAE net measurement, the post-1971 American standard, or approximately 300 horsepower in gross figures, which was the measurement Holden used in its own marketing. The engine was not tuned for maximum drag strip output. It was built for the kind of performance that made sense on the Hume Highway between Sydney and Melbourne: strong mid-range torque, reasonable fuel consumption at sustained cruise speeds, and enough reserve to make passing maneuvers on two-lane roads feel confident rather than committed. The Monaro HT GTS 350 weighed approximately 3,300 pounds and could run the quarter mile in approximately 14.5 to 15 seconds in stock trim. These were not numbers that competed with the Stage 1's 13.38 on a drag strip. They were not meant to. The Monaro was calibrated for a different kind of performance than the Stage 1, in a different geography, for a different use case. What both cars shared was a position within their respective markets that their parent corporation was ambivalent about. Buick was not supposed to beat Chevrolet. Holden was not supposed to build performance cars at all. Both did it anyway, within the constraints their corporate structure allowed, using the tools available to them, which in both cases included Chevrolet-sourced V8 technology that General Motors distributed across its global brands with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The contrast between how each car used that shared DNA is instructive. Buick's engineers took the 455 cubic inch V8, an engine that Chevrolet had never offered in this displacement, and optimized it specifically for low RPM torque, the cold air induction, the enlarged cylinder head ports, the camshaft profile that produced maximum force at 2,800 revolutions per minute, rather than 3,600. The Stage 1 was an American muscle car in the most specific sense, built for the quarter mile, optimized for the drag strip, calibrated for the American obsession with elapsed times. Holden's engineers took the Chevrolet 350 small block, a smaller, lighter engine, and built a car around it that could sustain high average speeds across the continental distances of an Australian road network that bore no resemblance to the suburban American roads the Stage 1 was built to conquer. The Monaro GTS 350 was a grand tourer in the original sense of the term, a car calibrated for distance, not for the drag strip. In their respective markets, both cars were the same thing: the performance option from a division that wasn't supposed to be offering one. Buick in America, Holden in Australia, both operating within GM's global structure, both producing performance cars that their corporate parents viewed with varying degrees of discomfort, both leaving behind vehicles that collectors on both sides of the Pacific now hunt with extraordinary intensity. The Stage 1's American rarity is documented. 1,026 units left the factory with the Stage 1 option in 1970, and the attrition rate over 50 years has reduced the number of numbers matching survivors substantially. A verified Saturn Yellow GSX Stage 1 with documentation commands well into six figures at auction, and the combination of rarity, the corporate suppression narrative, and the strip data that confirms its performance has made it one of the most sought-after finds in serious American muscle car collecting. The Monaro HT GTS 350 exists in a different collector context because Australian car collecting operates differently from its American counterpart. Australian muscle cars of this era, the Monaro, the Falcon GT, the later Tirana GTRX U1, are collected primarily within Australia, and the values reflect both genuine rarity and the cultural significance of these cars to a country that developed its own distinct muscle car tradition in parallel with America rather than in imitation of it. A well-preserved HT Monaro GTS 350 commands serious money in the Australian market, though the values are less consistently documented in the international auction records that American muscle car prices generate. General Motors built performance cars on both sides of the Pacific in the same era using the same underlying engineering resources. In America, those cars came from the divisions GM least expected to produce them. In Australia, those cars came from the division GM had built to supply a market it understood to be fundamentally different from the American one. The Buick ran 13.38 and beat the most powerful engine Chevrolet had ever built. The Monaro was the car that an entire generation of Australians drove when they wanted to prove something on the Hume Highway. Both were forgotten by the corporations that built them almost as quickly as they were produced. Both are remembered by the people who found them.